Hey, look, we're going to have an old school hangout. We're actually using the G Plus thing. Now, I have heard that this is not going away to 2020 now. Now, I told people the other day that I think it was going away in April. No, I think it's just the communities that are going away, and they're going to keep the hangouts running for another year or so. Supposedly, if you find out more about that, let me know. But we're going to do an old style hangout because I don't want to set anything up. And I happen to like this format. I'm really depressed that this is going away because it's so much easier just to sit and go, right? You don't have that. You don't set up all of OBS. You don't set up Zoom. You just go, and we miss this stuff because Ozy and I have had hangouts like this for years. This is what we're used to. We're going to be going through withdrawals when they take this kind of thing away. But anyways, we are going to have a hangout tonight. We are going to be doing a little bit on Hume's problem of induction and YouTube's problem with production. And what we mean by that is that Shannon here, our lovely Shannon, had a pretty interesting discussion with Saiten Brunicate, or as he pronounced it, Britankant, I think, or something.
I don't even know if that was close to.
I don't know. He has a way of pronouncing it. I'll have to ask him again. He's done it a few times, but I think he did it in the video with you. But it was an interesting discussion. But I think that when they're talking about induction, I think there was some confusion there. And Ozy happens to like the subject, so he wanted to kind of explain a little bit more what Hume's problem of induction actually involves, not just the fact that induction doesn't lead to 100% certainty, and it can't, because that makes it deductive, right? You can't have a cogent invalid. I mean, you can have a cogent inductive argument, but it can't be valid because then it's deductive. But and we also want to talk about some of the stuff going on with YouTube, demonetizing and just eliminating channels, like no recourse. As we know, Landon Curtin All, his whole channel just went bye-bye. Even though he has no videos on it, he uses it for live chat and things like that nature. And so this is one of the nicest guys you ever want to meet, one of the smartest guys on the planet. And I'm not being hyperbolic. He actually is one of the smartest guys on the planet. And YouTube just went, no, you said something in chat, we didn't like it, and the algorithm caught it. Oh, you want to fight it? Oh, sure, you can fight it. And then I guess they do like a 90-second computerized algorithm that checks the whole thing again. If you meet a certain score, your channel's gone, and you're banned forever. Supposedly, this is a perma ban at that point. You can't even make a new channel if you think that they're wrong, which is bizarre. So I hope we can talk about that a little bit. Also, Shannon has the plague.
I do,
and so we're not going to stand too close to her.
Yeah.
I don't know. You were just fine yesterday. What happened in a day?
I don't know.
What is it up with your Nova Scotia cooties?
Yeah, it's more the MS, I think, than it is Nova Scotia.
Because it lowers your immune system?
Yeah.
Well, I don't like people being sick, so my hope.
Well, I'm so sorry that I've inconvenienced you, Steve.
Why would you come to my hangout in Perth?
More considerate.
I got so selfish. Just don't die in camera, okay? Because it really.
No, I turned my camera off. I don't want anybody deleting your channel because somebody died on it.
They would too, right?
That's what I was thinking. He'll get a strike if you die. So
yeah, ultimately,
I'll try to die when I'm after we're all done.
You really want to go take down somebody's channel? Just go kill yourself on it. That'll do it.
That's right.
Okay. Anyways, I'm gonna turn this over to Ozy real quick. Or Shannon, do you want to talk about your discussion with Saiten real quick, and then Ozy can tell us what the actual epistemic issues are with the Hume's problem induction?
Do I want to go over my chat with Sai? God, it was a long time ago. It was like 9 months ago that I chatted with Sai. I wasn't trying to debunk anything Sai said. I was mostly just interested in conversing with him and trying to kind of figure out the way that he thinks. So I guess I probably have different goals going into conversations than some other people do. Lots of people were looking to me to, I guess, defeat his argument. And it was early on in my channel. So I think a lot of people just really didn't understand what it is that I do and how I go about doing it. So it's always better to be armed with more information. So I welcome that. But I think that people may have been misunderstanding what my intent was even entering into the conversation. But I'm looking forward to learning more if I don't die.
And you know what? And Ozy and I have talked about this before, is that I'm actually kind of grateful that the presuppers and these people like Flatters even have come into the community in some ways, because I have noticed in the last 3 or 4 years when presups started coming around from Pal Talk, that when they first came around, they were just kind of annihilating people, right? The white belt atheists were just getting demolished. And people started taking notice and going, hey, maybe we should learn about this particular arguments, and maybe we should learn about this topic. And they did. And once they really did understand it, tides had turned, right? The presuppers were now getting demolished. And that was a fun thing to watch in real time happen, because how often do you see presuppers now going around in Hangouts? Oh, wait, you really don't. There's a few diehards, but a few years ago, it was like every Hangout, somebody had to come in and start running a precept script. Remember, Ozy?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I've said many times that if there's one good thing about presuppositionalism is that it has had an effect in these skeptical and atheist community, and in that movement to up their game and to learn a bit of philosophy. And a lot of people who sort of fancy themselves critical thinkers and skeptics don't really know the difference in between common distinctions like deduction and induction and abduction. And one of the things that's at the heart of the presupposition, sorry, I'm losing my ability to speak here. One of the things that's at the heart of the presuppositionalist, and I'll move over here. One of the things that's at the heart of the presuppositionalist apologetic is this idea of the uniformity of nature and a problem with induction. Specifically, how do we trust, on what rational basis do we have for trusting in the reliability of induction, right? So maybe I should say a couple of things about what induction is. Okay, well, let's contrast it with deduction. Deduction is something where you have an argument and the conclusion is necessarily entailed. That is, it necessarily follows from the premises. So if the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. No ifs, ands, or buts. If the premises are true, the conclusion is true. So an argument of this form would be one that uses an inference rule such as this. This is just one inference rule, modus ponens. A implies B, A is true, therefore B is true. Right? Everyone sort of understands that intuitively. You don't have to know the name modus ponens, right, to be applying that inference rule. Everyone has been applying that inference rule the whole of their lives. You know, if it rains, then the street would be wet. It rained, therefore the street was wet. Right? So that's perfectly commonplace deduction that we use all the time. And that's just one of many inference rules. There are others, modus tollens, disjunctive syllogism, a whole bunch of inference rules that we can use. So the point of deduction, though, is you have premises, and on the assumption that the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. It's effectively a certainty. Right? You don't have to have any real doubts about it. The doubts really will just rest on whether or not the premises are true. But under the assumption that the premises are true, the conclusion is guaranteed. Can't be wrong. Now, contrast that with induction, which works quite differently. With induction, what you're doing is you are starting with specific cases. You're not starting with a general premise like, you know, if this is the case, then that is the case, or all X's are Y, or something like that. You're starting with specific instances like, here's a black swan, here's another black swan, or here's another black swan, or let's say raven. Here's a black raven, here's another raven, and it too is black, here's another raven, and it's black. And then you reach the conclusion on the basis of all of these specific instances that therefore probably all ravens are black, right? So the conclusion there is probabilistic, okay? There's no guarantee that just because every raven you've ever seen was black, that the next raven that you will see will be black. There's no guarantee, right? So that's the difference between induction and deduction. So what's the problem with induction? Well, the problem with induction, there's many problems. There's Nelson Goodman's new riddle of induction, and there's the Raven's paradox and stuff like that. But when people talk about the problem of induction, they're talking about a specific problem that was raised by a Scottish Enlightenment philosopher named David Hume. And he put forward a problem with how we would justify induction. How could we trust in the reliability of this thing that we do, of relying on experience? How can we do this? How can we actually have any warranted rational confidence in the conclusion? Now, the objection, it has to do with the justification of induction, but the objection has nothing to do with how would we know with certainty. It has nothing to do with that. Nothing whatsoever to do with that. It has to do with, do we have any reason whatsoever to trust in induction? So it's not, you'll sometimes hear people say, well, look, you know, Hume's problem induction is somehow just stating that we can't be certain in our inductions. No, that wasn't Hume's objection. Hume understood that induction does not generate, it does not deliver the kind of certainty that we get from deduction. So what is the objection? It can't be that. He knew as well as anybody that that's not what induction does. So the the idea is this: whenever you are using induction, what you're doing is you are generalizing, you are making predictions beyond the evidence. Right? That's what we want. Right? I mean, that's what's so good about induction. The kind of ordinary induction we use every day, and the kind of induction that gets used in science, is you look at specific instances, you look at the data, and then you extrapolate, you generalize beyond the data, and you say, well, if I measure such and such on this day, and I measure it again on this day, and I always get the same values, then tomorrow when I measure this, I'll get the same result. I'm sorry? I'm getting feedback from somebody. Sorry. I thought someone else was talking. There's no difficulty with Hume's our use of induction. His objection is, how do we defend a rational confidence in it? How do we rationalize? How do we justify our confidence? Right? And we all feel confidence in induction. Every one of us uses induction every day. You get up out of bed, and you decide, I'm going to get up and make breakfast. So how do I solve this problem of getting up out of bed? Well, first thing I do is I throw off the covers. I sit up in bed. I put my feet on the floor, and I stand up. And I trust that my feet will not go through the floor. I trust that when I decide to get out of bed, my body will sit upright, and that when I reach for the doorknob, my hand will pass through the doorknob, and it won't turn into daisies. All of my predictions, everything I assume about the stability of the world, okay, involves induction. Every single day, in everything I do, I am using induction. I am relying on past experience to guide my future behavior, because I'm predicting what future experiences I will have on the basis of those previous experiences. So that's what induction is. So what exactly is the problem? Well, Hume says this. Well, look, how do I know that the future is going to resemble the past in relevant respects? How do I know that just because whenever I have in the past looked at ravens that they've all been black, how do I know that the next one will be? Well, it can't be a deductive certainty. There's no logical necessity that if something is a raven that it has to be black. There's nothing that connects those two concepts. So it's not a matter of logical necessity. So then what is it? And he says, well, we just have this expectation on the basis of having seen a lot of them that we will continue to see more. But okay, so some expectation gets generated in you on the basis of previous experience that the future is going to resemble the past. But on what basis can you assume that the future will resemble the past in these respects? Right? On what basis do you do that? Now, there's no logical reason why that has to be true. That is not a truism. That is not a matter of metaphysical or logical necessity that the future will resemble the past. So what people intuitively want to do is this. They'll say, well, look, what else am I going to do? I mean, induction works, right? And so they'll say, my justification for the use of induction is that it works. It generates true predictions. And it does, or at least has. That's as far as you can go. All you can say is that induction has generated all these wonderful results. And you'll say, well, right, but because it's generated all these beautiful results, all these wonderful predictions that turned out to be true, surely I can count on it in the future. Well, that's fine, except that is an inductive argument. What you're doing when you say that I can justify induction on the basis that induction works, what you're saying is induction has served me well in the past, therefore it will serve me in the future. But that's precisely to use induction as the justification for your use of induction. And that kind of an argument has a name. That's assuming your conclusion. The very thing that's at issue is whether or not you can assume that the future will resemble the past and that you can use induction in this way. You cannot use that as an argument. Now, everyone makes that mistake, right? It's actually one of the difficult things when you're teaching first-year philosophy undergrads this. It is such a powerful intuition and impulse to insist that no, it can't be. It can't be that at the very heart of induction, the very basis of all empirical learning is a fallacy, right? Well, it's not really a fallacy to use induction, but it certainly is a fallacy if you try to use induction to justify induction. So Hume doesn't think that there's anything irrational in the use of induction. He doesn't say that. But what he says is it's irrational and fallacious if you try to use induction to justify induction. Well, is there some other way to justify induction? Well, there isn't a deductive argument. because it's not necessarily true that the future will resemble the past. That's not a truism, right? Our confidence that the future will resemble the past is based entirely on the fact that in the past, the future did resemble the past did resemble the future, right? Or the future resembled the past in relevant respects. And so that's the problem. The problem is there's really two ways to go here. You either have a deductive justification for induction, which we don't have, or you have to use induction, which is to commit a fallacy. So that's the problem of induction. That's Hume's problem of the justification of induction. We don't have a way of justifying induction that isn't question begging and circular. And in what presuppositionalists are saying when they bring up this business of the uniformity of nature, is they're saying, look, the uniformity of nature is nothing. It's just an expression that says you assume that nature is uniform. That is, nature in the future will be relevantly like nature in the past. That the future will resemble the past. So Hume doesn't really talk about the uniformity of nature, but he does talk about this idea that the future will resemble the past. And so that's what that is when presuppers are talking about the uniformity of nature. They are pointing to the fact that there is in induction an assumption. And that assumption is that the future will resemble the past, that nature will be uniform, that it will continue to tick along as it has always ticked along in the past. And so the objection is not that induction doesn't work or hasn't worked. The objection is you don't have a reason for thinking that it will work. Now, this is not to say, he's not merely saying you can't be certain. He's saying you don't have any reason at all for any degree of confidence. If you feel even the slightest iota of confidence in an induction, you have to ask yourself, on what basis do you do that? And you do have a basis. That basis, though, is your belief that the future will resemble the past. But you don't have a justification for that. So if you assume that, everything is fine. And we all do assume that. I take that to be a properly basic belief, that every human being believes that. My dog believes that. My cat believes that, right? It's part of our animal nature, right? Everyone implicitly believes that. No one has to be taught it. No one has to have it explained to them. Most people go through life never considering the future will resemble the past as an explicit axiom or anything like that. But I think everyone does implicitly believe that. It's just something that our principle by which our brains operate that we've inherited from our ancestors long ago. On the assumption that the future will resemble the past, you can be confident in your inductions, provided you apply induction responsibly, not stupidly. There's such a thing as a hasty generalization, for instance. You can use induction badly, for instance, right? But provided you are responsible and not hasty in your generalizations, your inductions are fine, and you should rely on them. But you have to understand that when you're doing that, you are doing so within the scope of an assumption that you cannot justify or for which you do not have a justification. And that is the belief that the future will resemble the past. So that's the problem of induction. And that is a problem that we actually, I think, have to recognize when we're arguing with presuppositionalists, for instance, and they say, how do you justify, science and your use of, workaday, everyday inductions? You have to sort of concede that, well, yeah, I'm making an assumption here. And when they say to you, yeah, but on what basis do you affirm that with any confidence, that assumption? I think what we have to do is say, well, no, it's a starting point. I don't have a good reason for that, not one that isn't circular. I don't have a deductive reason for thinking it's true. And I don't have an inductive one, because an inductive one will just be a circular, fallacious argument. And then you just have to ask the presuppositionalist how they solve that problem, because they think they've got a solution, but they never deliver the goods.
Yeah, that's the whole thing with the Sci 10, and this is actually what happened in their discussion as well. I mean, the way Sci 10 or any presupper run it is that they'll say, look, at atheists, you don't have a justification for using induction. And of course, every time they will be saying, hey, well, we use it, therefore it's justified, and making that same mistake that Ozy just said. But what Sci will do is, and other presuppers will do, is say, look, you guys don't have a justification, but we do. And the reason we do is we have an omnipotent, all-knowing, benevolent being that tells us that he's not going to be changing the uniformity of nature, that things tomorrow will be the same today. That's their justification. So that's why they're saying we can be justified, from their perspective, as a presupper, they can say we could be justified to use induction. You can't. Now, they admit both of can use it, right? It has utility. But the presupper will argue that the atheist isn't justified to use it, because every time they attempt to justify it, they're using circular reasoning, because they have to use some kind of induction in order to try to justify it. I take it as a properly basic belief too, or you use the term faith-based commitment a lot. I don't see a distinction between faith-based commitments and properly basic beliefs unless you have something that distinguishes.
No, I think properly basic beliefs are faith-based commitments.
Okay.
There are commitments that we have, epistemological, axiological, or ontological commitments that we have. And in this case, this is an epistemological assumption that we make, that we just inherited from our ancient ancestors, a kind of implicit belief. But I'm curious, Shannon, does this sort of ring true to you? Does it strike you as glaringly false, or something else in between?
No, it all makes sense. I understand it. What I'm not hearing, though, which would be helpful if the point of this conversation is to assist me in future dialogues and being able to counter, if that's kind of the role that people see me as playing and they want me to be better armed for it, then I don't hear a great counter for it, aside from the fact that they're asserting that their deity grounds that. And aside from that, aside from just pointing out the fact that that's an assertion, that, like, what would you offer as a counter? Well, I mean, I understand the problem.
Yeah, there's a couple of things, but I'll let Nick please go ahead.
Hi, Nick.
Hi, Nick.
Hey, how's it going? Good to see you. Sorry, I'm late. I thought you had said tomorrow, but that was like 12 hours ago, and I got, oh my God.
Yeah, to me, the next day is until I actually went to bed and wake up. That's just,
Yeah.
so it's 4 o'clock in the
Steve
morning.
time.
Tomorrow is going to be tonight.
I do.
But
I do that.
We didn't start that much before you came in, so.
Well, and I think you'd only covered deduction, and I was cool with it. So it's interesting, because I think I'm going to have a sort of the same issue when we're debating morality in a couple of weeks. What I would argue, and I've never actually argued a precept before. I think it's looking forward to it. What I would argue is that they're actually stuck with the same problem. So I think there's a few things. First of all, and I had said this before, philosophers tend to annoy the living daylights out of people, because you look at it and you say, well, wait a minute, I use it, so what are you complaining about? Well, it can be pedantic, but we're complaining about the fact that you've got no justification to use it, and that's an issue to people who like to think and who like to work things out and figure out how things work. It's not an issue if you're just trying to go to work every morning, and who cares whether you've got justification to use it? It works. But when you're making these kind of arguments, you say to yourself, okay, do I have to justify it? Or presumably you have to justify it. And I think one of the things that when we talk about also something like not changing, but, or getting the community to rethink about the definition of atheism, to trying to look at how we've been looking at some of these things, there are some things that atheists take for granted nowadays as part of the argument. I don't have a burden of belief. I don't have any faith. I don't have any assumptions that I make. That's really not true. I think what we can say is we try to limit those to the bare bones minimum that any human being would need to get by, but that's their side too. And I think I would probably start from there. So when you take a look at, okay, they've spoken to God. God has told them that he's going to keep the universe working. How do they know that? And as soon as they try to talk about how they know that, they're going to get stuck in this exact same loop that Ozy was just talking about. And anything that they bring to bear in trying to argue that somehow they are immune to this problem is probably going to get them stuck right back in this problem, or one or two other alternative problems. So if the goal is to say, as an atheist, if the goal is to say, I'm not immune to it and it affects you, I think you're going to have a problem. In my mind, the goal is to say, yeah, it's a problem. It's not a practical problem per se. It's one that we deal with when we're trying to think about these things. But yes, I have to make assumptions in order to get this to work. But there isn't a single one I make that you don't make too. And you can get into how do you know the Bible's real? How do you know that vision you had of God was real? How do you know? How do you know? How do you know? and they're going to get stuck making the exact. I see no way that they're not stuck in the exact same position you are. So if we're all in the same boat, that in my mind, unless someone can think of something I missed, to completely pulls the teeth on their ability to say that they've got something over you.
Yeah, I think they just push I think it's a grounding problem. I think they just push the goalposts back a little bit. They're going to have to make assumptions at some point. They're going to have some kind of basic belief at some point, I think. But Ozy, you wanted to weigh back in?
Yeah, so I agree exactly with what Nick has said here. I think you can say, well, listen, I don't think what I would say, Shannon, when I'm pressed on this is I will simply concede I don't know how one could justify this. I in fact don't justify it. I have operated the whole of my life, just like my dog has the whole of its life, operated on this assumption. I have never tried to justify it. Most of the time, it would never even occur to me, except in a philosophical context, that there's this problem. How that I had this weird assumption, this weird metaphysical assumption about the nature of reality, namely the uniformity of nature, that the future will resemble the past. I have this weird assumption that has never even occurred to me to question, and I stake my life on it. Minute by minute, I'm living on the assumption that this belief is correct, right? So the first thing I do is concede. Yeah, guilty. I don't have a justification for this, right? And don't fall into the trap of trying to use induction, because then you just end up looking like you don't get it, like you don't understand that you're committing this fallacy of circular argumentation, right? And there isn't a deductive proof of it. I mean, if there was a deductive proof of it, it would just become a form of deduction. It wouldn't be.
Yeah, it would just be deduction. Yeah, it would be.
Right. So you'd have a deductive argument, not an inductive argument.
Actually, I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Sure, if I could just finish this point. So,
yeah,
Shannon, the first thing to do is don't fall into the trap of thinking there's just got to be a way to justify this. Maybe there isn't. Maybe someday some brilliant philosopher will come up and confect a brilliant argument that shows us there really is a way to justify it. It really is rational all along. It isn't an unwarranted assumption that undergirds everything else that we call rationality. It really is rational in and of itself. It's not pre-rational or irrational. It really is rational. Right? That argument, if there is one to be made, is forthcoming. We don't have one that really satisfies the problem. But so that's the first thing. Don't fall into the trap. I would just sort of concede defeat, and then do as Nick says and say, well, listen, how do you solve the problem? Now they're going to try to say, well, you see, God is timeless and unchanging and stuff like that, and He created the world. He created it to be uniform, to reflect His nature, and He created us with minds that are able to apprehend and take in these regularities and so learn from experience, because we really are in a world where the future resembles the past, because God created a stable universe where the uniformity of nature is a fact. But all they're doing then is they are taking the uniformity of nature and they are saying the justification for the uniformity of nature is the uniformity of God's nature. Well, how the hell do you justify that? On what basis do you assume that do you justify that God's nature is uniform and that He created? So not only do they have to sort of establish that God exists and God created the universe and that, right, with a uniform nature, not only do they have to show all that, they then have to show that God's nature itself is uniform. So they're really just kicking the can down the road.
So we both have a presupposition. They're just pushing their presupposition one layer back.
Yeah,
that's right. They are kicking it into a metaphysical realm, but they're not actually solving the problem. They haven't got a reason why nature is uniform or reality is uniform. All they have done is added this really metaphysically extravagant layer on top of the problem that doesn't solve the problem. It exhibits the same. Right. It exhibits the very same problem. Right. So that's what I would do. That would be sort of my approach, and I always like to say, listen, if you're going to be fashioning yourself a critical thinker and a skeptic, you need to know the limits of your own epistemology, right? You need to know what can be known and where you can't know things, how confident you can be, and where you're operating on an assumption, and when you're not, when you're deriving a conclusion from something, and when you are in fact just starting with an unjustified assumption, right? And I think the mistake here is that a lot of people who, when they hear this presuppositional argument, don't appreciate that what's being pointed out to them is a limit in their own epistemology, and and they don't realize that that limit is a limit, as Nick said, that their opponents who are challenging them have as well. The presuppositionalist is in the same boat. They're in exactly the same epistemological boat. They don't have a solution to this problem. So, I mean, if that problem is so devastating to our worldview that somehow it invalidates it and makes knowledge impossible, right, or at least a certain kind of knowledge impossible, if that's true, it's just as true for the presuppositionalist, right? Introducing God doesn't solve the problem. It just pushes it into some metaphysical realm, and of course that is adding another posit, right? That's even less parsimonious. So the problem is not solved, and you've introduced this layer of metaphysical complexity that I think is highly dubious. But even if you accept it, even if you yourself are a theist and you hear this argument, you should say, well, wait a minute, you haven't solved the problem. That's not a good objection for, to an atheist. It's not. That's an objection that cuts equally well for every position.
And what they may say too is they may say, well, look, God has said he's going to keep things constant and he never lies. So by that grounds, I can know, so I can answer what Ozy was talking about. That's how I know. But then again, okay, how do you know that what you've read about God or heard about, let's grant that there is a God, how do you know that it is the God of the Bible and the God that you've been told? And you get right back into, so it's actually, we've just added another step, but it gets right back into every single argument that's already been hashed out time and time again. So
plus God says he deceives people in the Bible on purpose, so it's kind of a defeater to that anyway.
Yes.
Before we get to zero real quick, I just want to add on that. I think a lot of atheists have this pushback against the word like faith and faith-based commitments, and a lot of them don't want to have to recognize that some things they do are just taken unjustifiably. They're just they're irrational. There are things that we just have to make assumptions for. We can't know everything, right? So I think a lot of atheists, for some reason in their ontology, don't want to recognize that fact, and there's a resistance there to say, hey, look, I don't have a justification for using induction, but you know what, neither do you. So what? It's nothing wrong with having faith-based commitments, and this is why I really hate that word epistemist, because I think it's really detrimental to the atheist cause, because it doesn't recognize the fact that we do have things, and we don't use the word faith the same way that like religious person would, but it's still something we take on faith that the uniform of nature will hold, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's the whole thing, that when you're talking to a presupper, they want to trick you. They want to get you to one. They know that that a lot of atheists don't like the word faith. They don't like the word unjustified, right? Your use of induction is unjustified. Oh, can't have that. Let's make up stuff, And so the atheist goes flailing to try to justify it, right?
I just want to make sure, since you invited me here to have a conversation with me, specifically stemming from my conversation with Sai, that you're not directly referencing me here. Just, I want to be certain and clear.
No. This is
you were not trying to make up epistemology.
Okay.
Really,
because if I did, or I gave that impression, I want to be called. I want to be called out on it, and I want to have tighter arguments.
You had some missteps.
But I like things being direct.
Yeah.
People keep saying atheists do this, or the mistake you make is this.
Shannon represents all atheists. You see that? She is
the premise of this conversation was for to reference the conversation I had with Sai. So I just want to make sure.
No,
Shannon,
you had a discussion.
Shannon, but I was going to. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Ozy. No, go ahead, please.
Okay, sorry. I thought I was stepping on somebody there.
No.
So the reason I thought it was particularly pertinent in connection with your discussion with Sai was there was a couple of points where he was talking about this problem of induction and uniformity of nature, right. And you were having a little back and forth, and I thought a couple of times you sort of had missed the point of
probably
how do you justify your confidence in induction. And that I thought was the mistake. You were not making the other mistake that Steve was just talking about that so many people do, which is they try to come up with an epistemology on the fly by the seat of their pants and try to solve the problem of induction.
I'm going to solve it here and now today.
Exactly.
Right, yeah, exactly. And that is a kind of hubris that infects people. I mean, it's really a case of Dunning-Kruger when people do that. They just don't know enough to realize this is a tough problem. They think because, heck, everyone uses induction. Science relies on induction, and science has worked so massively well It just can't be that there's a problem with justifying induction. It just can't be, right?
Yeah.
So people argue out of that sense of a kind of outrage. It cannot be, but it can be.
I appreciate it.
There's another objection that people will hit you with, though, if you use the stratagem that I've just recommended and that Nick has just recommended. You sort of say, well, look, I'm just going to cop to the fact that, listen, this is an assumption, but you've got the same problem. As soon as you say, well, you've got the same problem, they will accuse you invariably of the tu quoque fallacy.
Tu quoque, yeah.
Right. And the tu quoque fallacy is the fallacy. It's the fallacy of saying, well, you do it too. So, your doctor says, while puffing on a cigarette, you need to quit smoking. And then you say to your doctor, well, what do you mean I need to quit smoking? You're smoking too. Now, that's a fallacious argument when you tell your doctor, you have no business telling me that I should quit smoking while you're puffing on a cigarette. And the reason it's a fallacy is because the doctor can be completely correct that you ought to quit smoking. And the fact that he's smoking a cigarette does not invalidate the fact and his argument that you ought to quit smoking, right? So that's the tu quoque fallacy. It's a kind of the argument about hypocrisy. You are saying, well, you do it too. Well, if I'm doing this thing, you do it too. But it's only tu quoque. You would only be guilty of the tu quoque fallacy if you were trying to justify induction and commit this fallacy, right? And then you'd have that problem. But it's not tu quoque to say, well, wait a minute, no. I concede that I can't justify this, right? I'm not the one arguing in a circle, right? You're asking me to argue in a circle. You're insisting. The presuppositionalist will always tell you, give me an argument to justify your this confidence that you have in the uniformity of nature. And you have to basically, you can ask them, well, what do you want me to use? Do you want me to use deduction? Well, there isn't such an argument. You want me to use induction? Well, now you're asking me to commit a fallacy. Are you insisting that I commit a fallacy? No. Then piss off. You have to let me admit that I don't know, right? But you don't either, right? But it's not like I'm committing a fallacy and then I'm pointing out that you too are committing a fallacy. I'm not willing to commit a fallacy, which is why I will grant, okay, yes, it's an unwarranted assumption.
Or
It's not a fallacy.
hang on.
Unwarranted assumption.
I know Zero's been trying to get in here, Nick, real quick. If we get to him real quick, because I know he had a question. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Right back to you.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to understand, like, if time was like any of the other spatial dimensions, would you have the same problem just for extrapolating observed events to unobserved events? Like, you'd have to basically assume that things that you could observe and things that you could never observe weren't sufficiently different. Like, you would still have the problem of induction, right? Or would it not be the same?
If I understand you correctly, yeah, you'd still have the same problem, because the problem doesn't hinge on what is observed and what is unobservable. It's what is observed and what is not yet observed, right? Remember, most of our inductions that we make day to day turn out right? So the difficulty is not, remember, and I should have said this earlier, no one is saying that induction doesn't work or hasn't worked, right? No one is saying, the argument isn't induction hasn't worked. It clearly has. So we're starting with the fact that it has worked. But no one is even saying, including Hume, no one is saying induction doesn't work, right? That's not even the conclusion. The conclusion of the argument is you don't have a good reason for your confidence that it will work. So whenever someone says, but induction works, you have to say, you mean it has worked. Now give me the reason why you think it will tomorrow or in the next minute, right? And they'll say, well, it's worked right up until this minute. Why wouldn't it work in the next minute? Why wouldn't it work in the next minute is an appeal to ignorance. Give me a reason why it wouldn't. That is classic argument from ignorance, right? You're the one saying it will. Give me a reason why you think it will. So it hasn't. If I understand you correctly, it has nothing to do with the what is unobserved but observable versus what is unobservable. It has nothing to do with that. It's simply what we how we can possibly be confident about the future on the basis of the past.
So it is like if we had a different universe where time was a spatial dimension, but we couldn't see anything to the left of us somehow, would it, like, we wouldn't have the same problem with saying that things that we can't observe to the right of us will still hold true if we move left? Like, I guess I just don't understand why time is such a central aspect of it.
Oh, because it's about prediction. because so time, I think time is a valuable here, valuable, or rather a relevant variable here. Prediction requires time. To predict is to talk about the future. Even when we talk about retrodiction, we're talking about predictions in the past. Well, how could you have a prediction in the past? Well, for instance, if I predict that on a certain theory, for instance, a certain archaeological theory, if we dig here, we should find such and such. We should find certain pottery shards, or we should find a certain fossil. And if we dig here, we shouldn't find, these things because these organisms haven't evolved yet, according to our theory, or something like that, right? So even a prediction about the past, right, what we call retrodiction, is still a prediction. It's a prediction about what you will observe in the future if you dig there, right? But it's just a prediction about what has happened. Okay, but even that is ultimately a prediction about what observations we will make in the future. So I think there isn't a way to escape the fact that this is about time, that this is a tensed problem, if you will.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to escape it. I was just kind of trying to get a handle on whether there was a more general problem of basically observing. Yeah. All right. Thank you. That's all I wanted to ask.
Before we get back to Nick, I did have a question I wanted to ask Ozy, because somebody brought this up the other day, and actually I had to think about it. It was actually pretty cool. For an example of induction, and this is straight from like Rutgers, it would say something along the lines of like 1,000 gumballs, right, or something, and it says almost all the gumballs are blue. X is a gumball. X is blue. That's a cogent inductive argument, because almost is over 50% and it's less than 100%, so it's not deductive. But somebody had noted that if you actually do add the word probably, right? If you say, well, the X is probably blue, now you're making a deductive argument, because that conclusion that is probably true is always going to be true 100% of the time. That it is true. That it is probably true. Does that follow? And that makes sense to me. This is why when it says, almost all the marbles are blue, X is a marble, X is blue, it doesn't say probably blue, it actually says X is blue. Is that because if it said probably blue, it makes a deductive argument? Because that is true. X is probably blue is a true conclusion, which means that whole thing would now become a deductive argument.
Honestly, I'd have to think about that.
I had to think about that too, right? I was like,
I don't think the first one's an inductive argument. I just think it's got a probability of being
argument. I have. Yeah, I mean, literally, that's it. I think they said something like, almost all the students at Yale do this. Bert is a student at Yale, therefore Bert does this. That's it doesn't say probably in any of the examples. So that's how you would do a cogent argument. And somebody had mentioned, well, because if you add probably to it, it makes it a deductive argument, because that always is going to be true. It is always going to be probabilistically better or higher that person is, because of the almost from the first premise.
Yeah, I don't think that makes it a deductive argument, to be honest.
Think about that for a while and get back to me.
I don't think that's deductive. I don't know what rule of inference you'd be following that would make that deductive. I'm sure there would be a way of phrasing it. There would be a way of phrasing it. Like as a syllogism. You could form it as a syllogism such that the conclusion was necessitated by the premises, but
the induction has to be between over 50 and less than 100%. It can't be valid. An inductive argument can never be valid.
Right.
So if I said the conclusion, if I said almost all the marbles are blue, X is a marble, X is blue, X is probably blue, that conclusion is 100% true every single time. It is always true that X is probably blue. Making it
strictly speaking, the way that's formulated, it's not deductive. But I bet you could formulate that slightly differently. It would just be a matter of rewording it. A lot of things
approach.
Yeah, well, a lot of things sound like they're deductive that aren't. Like if I say John is a bachelor, and I say therefore John is unmarried. Now most people would say that's a valid argument. Right, it sounds valid, right?
Well,
but it's not valid.
You're missing a step.
It's not an argument. It's
right. But most people would say it's valid, that the conclusion follows. Right, but it's missing a step, and that step is that if someone is a bachelor, then that person is unmarried. Now, once that step is in there, now it's a deductively valid argument. And I suspect that something like that is going on with the example you gave, but I'd have to think about it some more and see it written out.
Anyways, we got Chris in here too. Do you want to get back to you real quick?
Just real quick, in the hopes of helping Shannon, although she may be completely on top of it, but another two ways to look at it. I love that no smoking example. I thought that whether your doctor says stop smoking. So the tu quoque is where you use as a defense to your argument the fact that someone else is guilty of the same thing. The reason this isn't a tu quoque is because you're not actually defending your position. You're actually ceding the point and saying, you are correct. I cannot justify it. So in that case where it would be, yes, doctor, you're right. I should stop smoking, and you should stop too.
That's much better put. Thank you, Nick. That's much better put than what I was saying. Thank you.
So I was thinking that might help. And then so that's why it would not be a tu quoque, is because you're granting them the point and then just saying it also applies to them. The other thing was on justification. So I think atheists tend to want to say, I have a reason for every belief I hold. I have a reason for it. And the problem with this is that's I think what we mean when we say it is unjustifiable. There's no reason. You cannot come up with a logical reason for holding it, which is why atheists, and then they get into all the ones that Ozy gave. Well, wait a minute, it's always worked. Yeah, you are now begging the question, or you're assuming what's at issue. It's a logical. You can't use it to justify it. So, in a philosophical sense, you have no justification for it. You have no reason to believe it. And Ozy was right. That makes no intuitive sense. What do you mean I got no reason to believe it? Yeah, I know. Again, this is why people look at philosophers saying, what are you guys doing? You know, I liked the world when I didn't have to think about things this way. But just to clarify, I think that's why atheists sort of balk at it and they say, no, I have reasons for everything I believe. No, science makes assumptions. Geometry makes assumptions. What is a point? What is a line? What is a point line? I forget the third one. But those are some. That may be it.
Point line.
No, because a plane is comprised of lines. So the minimum assumptions are they cannot define a point. A point is just, you have to assume a point just is. A line is a series of points, but you're stuck with the same infinite amount of points. Science makes assumptions. It assumes induction. It assumes that the universe has laws that will maintain. It assumes that these laws can be. So there are assumptions. And if an atheist says, I don't make assumptions, I'm sorry. So anyways, I think it was a bit more apropos earlier, but I'm hoping that is a different way to look at it that might help as well.
Yeah, I wish a lot of the people I would have stopped avoiding certain things, like words like belief, words like faith, words like assumptions, words like unjustified. It's just, again, the pre-supper will go out of their way to hone in on these things, right? This is what they want to feed upon. They want somebody to really have that kind of pushback, because they know people are watching, and they get this adrenaline out of it. They love using philosophy as a weapon. And this is why I admit I enjoy destroying pre-suppers, and I love watching pre-suppers get destroyed. It's one of my favorite things. I love that even more than flat Earth. When I watch somebody dismantle a pre-supper, I enjoy it. I don't know if it sounds statistical or not, but I really do get a kick out of it, because they're so adamant about their philosophy, right? But they use it in such a disingenuous way. But I think that the people that are using things like, I don't have any beliefs, or I don't have any assumptions. Yeah, a precept or any kind of disingenuous, dishonest agent, bad actor that's going to get in these conversations, they're going to ping on that. They're going to just run rampant over that with good reason, because this is one of those times where they're not wrong on that, right? I mean, we all have beliefs, and so when they hear somebody say, "Well, I don't hold any beliefs," yeah, it's going to be a quagmire after that point. And I think that it really does a disservice to your own argument when you're saying something so just completely off the mark, so outlandish, to say that you don't have beliefs. But anyways, Chris jumped in. You remember Chris Ozy, right? He was on the non-sequitur.
Hello. Yeah. We spoke briefly last week. Yeah.
Yep.
Hello again, Chris.
And thank you. Chris is now Patreon too, by the way. Thank you very much, Chris.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I don't have much to add to the discussion you guys are having right now. I'd rather talk, I came in to talk to Steve more about the other issue we were talking about, so I'm perfectly fine waiting until later. when we can switch.
Yeah, we've been going for a while. I kind of want to get into the YouTube thing if we can jump ship at this point from the Hume's problem induction of Shannon. I think Shannon's got a grip on it, right? And again, Shannon, I think you had a great discussion with Cy. I mean, he's very personable, and we both actually like the guy. I know I get a lot of flack for that, but he's fun to talk to. Now, do I think he's right? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. And he's not hard to take down and just stop in his tracks if you know his argument. But
that wasn't the point of that I was trying to.
Right,
and that's what I was attempting to do. I wasn't there to rebuke everything that he was saying. I did get him to make some concessions in that conversation that I don't think he would have made otherwise. If the entire conversation was just about me rebutting his arguments, that wasn't
totally agree.
Wasn't the point. It's not what I do, but this is valuable information for me to be armed with just in general. So I appreciate taking the time to go with me. I've in the time since, I've actually looked into it a bit more as well. I've gone over it with Paul quite a bit because I didn't actually realize, like, I'm just not knowing much about philosophy. It's not my field. It's something I'm interested in, but not something that I've studied at length. I've only taken a few courses on philosophy. I just didn't even realize that I had presuppositions. It's just not something that you think about day to day operating in your life until you get into this sort of realm where you're thrown up against people who are making these sorts of arguments, right? So valuable information to have.
Yeah, and
you operate in
with your argument or your discussion with him was a completely different dialectic, and I totally get that. And by the way, Cy likes you, right? So Cy was not trying to play a game of got you with you, right? He wasn't trying to run a full prescript with you. He was actually, I think, really trying to get you to understand the problem. And this is why you guys were having a good conversation, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So anyway, so the YouTube thing going on. I don't even know where to begin on this because this is a scary thing that YouTube can pretty much take down your channel anytime for any reason that they see. They don't even need to give you what video did it. They don't need to tell you the details. All they have to say is that something that you did violated their terms of service or was considered to be harassment or child endangerment, or a few other things. Jay Parrick, if you guys know him, he's been a long member of the Great Debate community. He had his whole channel taken down for child endangerment, and yet all he does is hang out videos. He doesn't even do, like content. He just does hangouts, and he's a pretty mellow dude. He's a security guard. He just talks in the middle of the night when he's bored. So they wouldn't tell him exactly what was considered to be child endangerment on his channel. Now it could be people putting comments on a video. It could be people in the live chat. As moderators, now we're very careful of monitoring, these kind of things, and unfortunately it's impossible to do it full time. But I have great moderators in the live chat, so I'm not too concerned about something like that. If a person comes over and starts running something, their stuff is eliminated. So when it gets rendered, it doesn't get in the final thing, and there's nothing to even evaluate. But there was a channel called was it Top Hats and what's the name of the channel? Let me see here. I got it right here. Top Hats and Champagne Bar. And they're an anti-social justice warrior channel, but they do so satirically, right? They're basically just funny guys that talk about some of the things they know in the SJW community. And I guess that was offensive to YouTube. And so YouTube just terminated the channel. Wasn't strike, just said, this is violating harassment. Didn't say who they were harassing or what was the harassing video, but they had some content. They had a lot of content. And so as content creators, and I'm gonna say on air, Thomas Westbrook, you were right on this. Thomas had actually said, hey, Steve, do you really think that YouTube has the ability to put these policies in practice that will be equitably and fairly and do so without collateral damage kind of thing? And Holy Cooley was right, because I said, well, I'm kind of hoping, I'm really hoping that they do. I didn't say that they would, so I'm not wrong, but he was actually right very much that I don't think they're really being fair and judicial in how they're approaching what channels are content that shouldn't be around and which ones are not, things like hate speech. A lot of the topics that people talk about in the atheist community on their channels are controversial topics. They're not hate speech. They're talking about a topic. They're not platforming somebody going out and just really bloviating on a topic that is clearly divisive and clearly against a specific group of people. That I can understand YouTube doesn't want to have on their platform, and I understand why the advertisers don't want to advertise on that. But I think there's a lot of collateral damage that's happening, and there's no redress. There's no remedy for if you get removed from YouTube. It's a very difficult process. It's not like a corporation where you can call them up and ask for a customer service representative and say, look, I'm having this issue. How do you resolve it? It's not American Express, right? So I wanted to get your guys' insight on this and what you think for your channel. Oh, and yeah, Landon Kurt Knoll, one of the greatest minds of our time. Somebody who literally helped develop the internet. YouTube may not be around if it wasn't for this guy, and I don't think I'm being very hyperbolic. He developed some of the hashtags, the Fowler hashtag in C++, or I don't know what language it was, that actually is utilized in Cisco networking and routers. So yeah, I mean, he's an astrophysicist, dude. I mean, or he's an astronomer. He's a computer scientist and he's a mathematician. And you're gone. He's gone. And one of the reasons is because something had happened somewhere. They didn't tell him why. He went to go appeal it, and they said, well, we've reviewed it. Your appeal is denied. And because you appeal it, you are now permanently banned from YouTube. So I guess if you appeal it and you lose, for some reason, you're permanently banned. But anyways, what have you guys heard on this? Sean, do you want to add anything to this one before you go? As a content creator, and of course, Godless Cranium, some
that was bad.
He got demonetized. Now
he got demonetized, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't removed yet, but
he can't use end cards anymore. He can't get super chats. He can't he can't use internal links anymore. He's lost the ability to have any of his videos monetized. Because he's over 30,000 subscribers, he qualifies for the partner program now, but he can't register for that. His videos aren't being promoted, and all they said was it was because of reused content. Like, there's no clarification, there's no next steps given, there's no, hey, these videos are the ones that you need to look at, this is what you can do to fix the problem. Just reuse content, and you have 30 days to shape up. We're not going to tell you how to shape up, though. You can just kind of figure that out on your own.
I love that. That's my favorite thing, too. They don't tell you, do they?
You get 30 days to fix the problem. Okay, how do I fix the problem? Well, that's up to you to figure out. That's not our problem. We're just the ones that are holding this guillotine over your head. You've got 30 days to decide whether or not we're going to drop it on your head, but we're not going to tell you how to figure out how to stop us. Like, it's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare.
By the way,
he had no strikes, none, zero strikes.
But the funniest thing is when you contact YouTube. Let me tell you what really happens. Kyle and I actually did some experiment on this. Kyle can testify to this.
Do they pass the Turing test?
They don't pass the Turing test.
I didn't think so.
they really don't. It is automated. It really is. Kyle would do certain keywords, and it would just pick out random keywords and throw you back an automated reply that looks like it's from somebody. Yeah, and that's from your whatever you when you get over 10,000, you get
your personal course, your personal person that's assigned to take care of you.
It's not
yet another AI from YouTube. Yeah, that sounds about right. Gosh, yeah, it's frustrating and it's scary because you have no idea what could happen. Because I mean, Godless Cranium does response videos, but they're not markedly different from anybody else who does response videos. He's never had a copyright strike against him, never even had a copyright claim against him, I don't think. The only thing that he did have happen in the past is that he did have one video, and this was well over a year ago, before I even had a freaking channel, that got put in a limited state. That's it. No strikes. Most of his videos were green straight across the board, and he just woke up one morning and was like, guess what? Game over. You figure out why, because we're not telling you. Reused content, whatever the hell that means.
When the whole apocalypse came about, videos were just like yellow, yellow, yellow. And then eventually over time, a lot of them became green again. It kind of like go back and forth.
Yep.
Didn't Godless Cranium suggest that someone had come up to him and started making fun of him for having had this happen, and then he got the impression. Well, he got the impression that they had actually done it deliberately, and it had been some false reporting. And
there's no way to know that for sure.
No, there's none. But I'm just saying that last I heard, that was his theory. And I mean, if it was that, I mean, that's just another. I mean, that just makes it even scarier because that Twitter is much better about that. But when Twitter first started getting serious about having reporting, there were Muslim groups in particular that really didn't like atheists, and so they would get together, and if they found an atheist, they got together and mass reported them. Yeah, and they got Atheist Republic blocked. They got who else? I think Pathos got blocked. They had all sorts of regular big name accounts blocked for nothing other than they just. So I mean, my hope is that's not what's happening, but that would just be another.
Well, that's another thing, though. Like, maybe it was no bullshit. I don't know if it was, and it would just be speculation. But you have no way of knowing. That's just like, it just goes back to, like, you're wildly flailing in the dark, trying to figure out what you did wrong, if anything, or if it's just the algorithm just happened to pick up a thing and misconstrue it. You can run the full gamut in your mind, and you'll never hit it, and you'll never know. That's like the abject lack of clarity is a disrespect to the creators that are the reason this platform exists and thrives, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, and it's bad business thing. I mean, if you have a problem, if a business has an issue with a particular channel and they don't tell you how to get a remedy for it, they don't tell you what you need to do to fix it, then what good is that? I mean, I've never seen anywhere in my life where somebody said, "Hey, look at these are you've committed from infractions. Okay, what infractions have I committed? Oh, well, you have to figure that out." Has that ever? I mean, does that work that way with a coding enforcement or something? The building enforcement comes by and say, "Hey, look at you're building here. You have some code enforcement issues. Okay, well, what do I need to fix? Oh no, you need to come and figure that out. We'll be back in a month."
Something with materials.
Yeah.
The materials.
Just redo your entire
What materials? There's lots of materials around here.
We do the plumbing,
one
piping,
of them, maybe two, could have been three. Figure it out.
Ozy, you want to chime in on this as well? I'm sure about the factor that this is scary. This is actually something that I find to be something every content creator, no matter what, should be concerned about, whether they do controversial videos or rebuttals or whatever. You could have a completely innocuous channel for some other reason. YouTube says, hey, we find this offensive. They don't tell them why. I mean, what happens if one day PewDiePie or something gets that algorithm hits them and they're like, "Oh, bye, Pewdie." That'd be hilarious.
Yeah, well, this really is a consequence of a platform that is so big, has so many users that they obviously cannot have enough people and looking at these things and reviewing these things. It's just impossible. So they rely on algorithms. The problem is there. This is a very, very crude AI that's doing this stuff, and that's why I think that they should not have anything about hate speech. I think that it just sets things up for an awful lot of unfair cases of people losing their channels, and some people are, it's their livelihood, so they're going to lose their livelihood because of it. Now, I'm not in that position. I have never monetized any of my content, ever. I don't have a Patreon or a Subscribe Star or anything like that. I've never done that, and I did that subconsciously because my content is controversial. It's about religion and sort of the intersection of religion and politics. And I didn't ever want to be accused of being in it for the money. So I did it, sort of for that principled reason. And that has sort of insulated me because I'm not monetized. I don't have to worry about, well, I'm monetized, but now, certain subjects are too controversial for YouTube. And so I can't get AdSense revenue now. And so then I have to start tailoring my content to avoid, losing monetization or never getting monetized and stuff like that. So I sort of avoided that, right? But I'm kind of fortunate. I didn't need that my YouTube channel to generate that kind of revenue. But not everyone is in that situation. There is a business model here, and I think that YouTube has a responsibility, a fiduciary responsibility to the content providers that allow YouTube to make money by selling the content, the viewership, audience. Remember, the product on YouTube is not the videos, right? The product is the views. Those of you out there watching, you're the product, right? You are what's being sold. You are being sold to advertisers, right? Your views and your clicks and your likes and your reshares and stuff like that. That's what's going on. That is what YouTube is monetizing. It's turning into money. And because they require content creators, I think they have a fiduciary responsibility to deal fairly with effectively the people who are their partners. They don't think of them as their partners, but they are partners. They are de facto partners here. We are not customers. We don't pay to use YouTube. but we make money if we're monetized, and YouTube makes money off of our content because we are the ones that generate the views. YouTube doesn't generate the views. It has actually YouTube has some of its own content that that generates money. That's fine. Presumably they're not flagging their own videos, but they have a system in place that is doing this, and that just seems manifestly unfair. It seems sort of irresponsible and unprofessional, and a violation of fiduciary responsibility, as I see it. So that's worrisome. It's worrisome in other ways. There's always been a problem with flagging and false copyright stuff, and it's been a problem because there's really not a great system of appeals in many cases. You know, you can appeal a copyright, a false DMCA, for instance, right? If someone hits you with a DMCA, you know, you can reply, but you have to give your name and address, right? You essentially have to uncloak. You have to give people, you know, access to your private information. And who is most likely to hit you with a false DMCA? Someone who regards you as an enemy. What are they going to do with that information? So the whole system is just sort of badly set up. Now, the DMCA rules are not set up by YouTube. That's a legal thing. It's an American legal thing. But the point is YouTube is operating within that. And so what we have here is a system of flagging and reporting and algorithms that can be gamed and are effectively weaponized against content producers, especially those that are producing controversial content. And I don't want to just, you know, have YouTube around to watch cat videos. I would like there to be some more substantial content and not have to worry. And all of this has a chilling effect. You know, if people can brigade one another and brigade a channel and take it down with, you know, false flaggings and reporting and DMCA notices and things like that, that has a chilling effect. Every time someone's channel goes down in this for mysterious reasons with no appeal, everyone else gets the signal. Watch your step. That's what's happening here. People are getting a message. There's a chilling effect. You better be careful what you say. You better not use certain words. You better not express certain unpopular opinions. You dare not, because you could lose your channel, and in some cases even your livelihood. And so that chilling effect is really what worries me more than anything else. It has this same effect on YouTube as political correctness and language policing has in university classrooms. It makes people afraid to think out loud, and I don't think that's ever a good thing.
Yeah, and that's my takeaway as well, because if you have people that are working for YouTube that have a specific political or ideological agenda, and they find some content to basically offend their senses, right? It seems like they can just unilaterally take action. And that is a chilling effect. A lot of us have different ideas. A lot of us have different views on things. And when you have an isolation mentality where you have to shut down opposition, that just to me implies that you have a very weak position, because we thrive on opposition around here. I mean, the great debate community has been around because people don't agree on everything. Most of our channels have been around because people don't agree on everything. And so you're going to have different ideological approaches to things. And if you just have these people that are saying, no, look we don't want you guys to have that discussion. We don't want the other side. We don't want the opposition. And what does it really say about your position? The things we talk about, I'm happy to talk about. I have strong convictions about certain things. I will take a lot of people on and discuss them on things that I feel I'm versed enough to do so. Other people will take them on things that they're versed to do so, right? I mean, Shannon handles a lot of topics that I couldn't even begin to get into if my life depended on it, right? Because she has an expertise in that area. And so if somebody says, you know, I don't like the way Shannon's approaching these things, I don't like what she's saying about this, it's personally offending me, ergo her channel has to go. That's disconcerting to me, because this is not how YouTube has been before. YouTube was a place where you can have controversy. Matter of fact, it was predicated on controversy. If you guys remember back in the day, you had 15 minutes of time. You had 15 minutes to make a video, and in that 15 minutes, you had to make a rebuttal, right? Shannon, you weren't around those days, but do you remember at least watching YouTube back in those 15-minute video days?
No.
Okay.
No, it wasn't. I wasn't. I wasn't around back.
Oh, you're so young. So young and naive.
I'm old enough to remember that. I'm old enough to remember that. And you know, it's funny.
Ozzy remembers when YouTube was actually a bulletin board service. Yeah.
Well, I was watching YouTube videos like from early days when they were like just like 8 minutes long and like really short. And one of the reasons I was never tempted to make content in those early days was I lacked the gift of concision, as everyone knows, and so I could never have made any content. It takes me more than 8 minutes or 15 minutes to clear my throat. So.
I have a thing to contribute before I go. I think a lot of this is because we're essentially seen, or like Ozy said, the audience is seen as a commodity. So advertisers are very trepidatious nowadays because of the cultural climate we're in, where anybody addressing controversial subjects is accused of either endorsing or perpetuating them. And then you wear the moniker of somebody who is a bad actor or somebody who is, not towing the line for the good moral values if you're engaging in conversations or attacking arguments on controversial topics. So because of that, because of the way that our cultural climate is shifting, but people like us, people who are engaging in these controversial issues, are paying a price. So that's something that we need to be more attentive to, I think, is what we contribute to that climate and how.
What do we do to support each other, though, Shannon? What do we do as content creators that I mean, obviously there's news reports of these things. When channel gets shut down and person puts it on Twitter, some news organizations have been picking it up. Now they're small news organizations, right? But some people have been commenting on it.
We could start by not cannibalizing each other.
Yeah,
that would be a good place to start.
Well, okay, but when you're doing I don't do a lot of response videos, and I don't use a lot.
Neither do I.
People, but those that you do, in order to have an effective response, you've got to show what they said, which is their video, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's fair use. Nobody's ever had an issue with that. And all of a sudden, is that considered reuse now? Is that what they're having an issue with, or I don't know what they're considered reuse.
I wish I knew.
Content protected ID, ID content and things of that nature. If I use your videos, you're not in the content ID matching system, right? My videos are not in the content ID matching system. Right. So I don't think YouTube cares about that. I think it's really going to be talking about using something that has content ID match. And it's not the ones that you get. I'm sure you get them too, is, hey, we've detected that you have some copyrighted material. Not to worry. This doesn't affect your channel. It just means your monetization goes to the other person, right?
Yeah, and then you contest it, and within 30 days, it reverts back usually, and it's usually a big corporation generally.
And that's another. Yeah, that's another.
I had one from the Discovery Channel for an 8-second clip that was on a Hangout that the system just picked it up and flagged it. The Discovery Channel was like, nope.
I kid you not. Do you remember when I was at Applebee's and I had Topic Thunder on? There was a content match because of one of the TVs in the background had TV on it.
I believe you.
It's just like a little TV. It caught that.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, I believe it. I don't know. I wish that there would be more clarity, and I wonder why they don't give more clarity. Like it lends to all of us creating theories as to why and engaging in speculation, and perhaps they want us to have that confusion so that we're more likely to just attempt to conform, assume the worst and attempt to conform to that perception.
Well, if I
think that's right.
Of course. But real quick, why is there any transparency? Why don't you never see a YouTube?
Because if they're completely transparent with us, then we can just fix the very clear problem that they have and conform. And if they're not very transparent with us, then we're forced to essentially assume the worst, engage in conspiracy theories, engage in speculation, and then we either give up or attempt to conform to everything that we can manifest as an idea of potentially why. So we'll either quit, or we will completely reconfigure how we deliver our messages and how we create our content to be as sort of innocuous and milquetoast as possible. And they don't have to give us clear and concise direction. They can just hope that that'll ultimately be the outcome.
So just cat videos.
Cat videos. Yeah, exactly.
I love cats.
Yeah, but I
Keep
would imagine that
unboxing.
I would imagine that's an unsustainable model. I mean, I
You
think
think?
eventually they would, well, but again, this is what happened with Twitter early on. And not to say, I mean, Twitter still has a significant number of difficulties, but when Twitter first started trying, and Facebook has now had the same problem, which is when they start trying to get serious about dealing with some of these issues, they automate the whole thing and they err on the side of just shut everything down. And then over time, and it doesn't take a lot of time, but over time they realize we're upsetting the people who are creating that content, and that's going to cut into our bottom line reasonably quickly. And so they try to find ways to pull it back some. I just think that because this is new enough yet that they haven't felt the pinch yet, and until they feel that pinch themselves, they're gonna. But I don't think it's quite that well thought out.
Exodus, though. They'd need a mass exodus, and where do we go?
Yeah,
Well, I think
They have a monopoly on this type of platform for anybody who wants their videos widely viewed, and who wants to be able to have a sustainable income source to recycle back in their channel or live off of in some circumstances. There isn't anywhere else. They're the only show in town. So if they're essentially trying to, trim the fat from their perspective and get rid of content creators that don't deliver a message that they feel is agreeable to advertisers, whether or not they have an audience, then they'll either conform, which is great. They've conformed to the type of message that they want to have delivered, which is what they ultimately want, or they'll give up and ultimately be potentially replaced with someone else, because there's an infinite number of people starting YouTube channels every freaking day. There's always going to be content to watch. They're not going to run out.
Yeah, but what about channels like Non Sequitur Show and Drunken Peasants and that kind of those kind of shows? I mean, that
I'd be worried.
They'll find a way. If they can find a way to make money off of those shows, they'd still rather find a way to do that if that's possible. I think right now it's just so much easier to take a hatchet to absolutely everything that's questionable, and then once they start to see a drop off, they can say, well, wait a minute, we can, if we put a bit more of a human element into it. God forbid, we're not going to actually have people answering the phones, but if we have a bit more of a human element to it, we can get back some of what we're losing, and then it's just sort of a return on investment, trying to narrow that margin for them, where they're spending not a lot of money, but enough to maybe get back some of what they're losing. They'd also don't want to inspire someone to try to create an alternative, because that's how Facebook and other companies started off of MySpace. So
Look at you assuming YouTube thinks things through.
Yeah, I think you guys are giving
horrible
credibility on here on how they plan this out. I don't think they really put.
I don't think they're planning it. I'm not saying they're planning it. But I'm saying that's where they're going to go.
Yeah, but
I'm saying that's where they're going to go.
Landon joined us who, like I said, a lot of this is because Landon's channel got removed for whatever reason. So if Landon, you want to, by the way, welcome, buddy.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and hello from.
So direct from the horses or friendly amateur astronomer, mathematician, computer scientist, Landon, say from your mouth, you want to kind of tell us what happened?
Well, my channel got flagged, and it was kind of interesting that, for example, I'm not a content creator. I have never uploaded a channel. I don't think I've ever even commented on a video. I show up in chat sometime, but it was surprising. And the message you get is something of the form, you've violated community guidelines. If you want to appeal, click here. And you got 1,000 characters in which to put saying what? Because if you probably have seen the vague YouTube community guidelines, look at that and said, I don't know there's any content for me to violate. What's the deal? And so that was essentially my appeal. Now, the reason why you might be flagged is typically a number of reasons. There are so-called AI bots that look at video content and might do things, or there are these so-called the YouTube heroes that go and might decide that you've done something wrong, or you get a bunch of complaints, or let's say even a copyright holder can allege an infringement. But for whatever the reason, when you're flagging can actually be completely fallacious. It could be just a troll doing something, but at that point, it's up to you to appeal. And And the appeal then is, and they get lots of appeals, right? That's kind of the YouTube's sort of thing. And someone will use various tools to analyze your content, and they analyze things like, what videos, bots will look at what videos, what keywords might show up. They go and even analyze who you're subscribed to, what videos you read. They also will take into account other public social media that is in there. So to give you sort of a complete picture, and there's sort of a scoring mechanism that I then use internally, where, and I don't know what the algorithm is, but essentially it's kind of like a credit score. And if you don't reach a certain level, then you're out. And for people like me that aren't content creators, we don't get community strike. There's nothing to community strike me on. So when my channel the appeal got denied, I have a permanent ban. Now it was kind of interesting because I was a premium YouTube supporter, right? I had some hosted a number of people's premium services. I was using YouTube Red, so I can read in the background, a number of things. And one of the things that I found was that YouTube was very willing to charge my credit card money for a service that I couldn't use. And the only way I could turn it off is to log into YouTube and turn it off. But of course, being banned, I can't do that.
Wow.
Right?
Oh my
So
God.
you're talking about your ultimate catch-22.
Wow.
So I actually went and
Hold on, I'm in the wrong business. I got to figure out how to do this. I got to wait a minute.
Brilliant, right there. Brilliant for YouTube.
The irony at some point, and the big rant I did on you can see on Pimpmon's channel, but at some point I said, do I really want to be associated with this YouTube? And my clear answer was no, right? And so the way I had to undo the credit card thing was to transfer the credit card. I have this service where I can create virtual credit cards. And so I created a virtual credit card, $1, because they usually go and try to do a probe, to see, can you get at least $1 off it to see if it's real. So I transferred over to a virtual credit card and removed it from there, and then deleted the virtual credit card, and then had to go and delete my account. By the way, when you get permanently banned, your YouTube account data doesn't go away. It's just not visible. So all of my previous chats and so forth, all that record was hidden, but it was only when I deleted the account and did the credit card things where I was able to move it. But so I've just had to do other things like read astrophysical journals and
what was the strike? What was the strike? How do you get a strike if you have no content? I'm kind of confused.
Well,
what does it mean to get flagged if you? What are they flagging?
Well, one of the things that probably so the only thing that's visible is either how I am in let's say Twitter, but I can't see that because I post astrophysical stuff. Back I would recommend following me on Twitter, Landon Noll, LENDONNOLL, because I basically take sort of the best of science and physics and just retweet things and so it's pretty innocent there. But in having some side conversations with people who weren't my reviewer but sort of said, here's the general thing of what happened, the tools can come up and say things like, for example, in the Milwaukee Atheist Sunday School shows, there's a meme where whenever they're reading the Bible and someone says behold, everyone goes and types in behold. And so you see a bunch of beholds because there's some Bible passages that are pretty behold laden. And so the one thing it says, well, it looks like you're typing in behold a lot. That looks like spamming. Another thing was it's known that I have not said very kind things about the so-called Queen of the so-called United Kingdom. I'm not a fan of royalty. And maybe some royal sycophant decided that was offensive.
But I'm so confused. How do they flag? Okay, if you're on somebody else's hangout, right? Like if you're on Milwaukee Atheist and you're talking in there, how does your channel get affected for what you say? Because in order for you to type in the chat, you have to log in as YouTube. So your chats are registered against your account. So it's not what you're saying in the hangout, it's what you're typing in the live chat. It's what you type in the live chat. In fact, one of the things I recommend to content creators,
protect your audiences and don't save the live chat with your videos. No one really wants to see that sort of stuff anyway, welling of the fact. But I do not recommend saving live chat. Now, it doesn't mean that they can't go and see it because YouTube records all this stuff, but it means that some other person can't get offended by looking at the live chat and seeing some word or some.
This is amazing. What you just said there, right? It speaks to the whole problem.
Yes.
Someone could be offended. We are all at the mercy of the most peevish people in the world.
Yeah.
Right?
An example.
That's what's wrong with this. Right?
And you raise a very good point, Steve. I'm sorry. That was actually
Ozy. Ozy said that.
Ozy, I'm sorry, Ozy. One of the things that the person looking through, and this is sort of their bots, because they said that technically you might spend maybe 90 seconds to 2 minutes looking at your entirety of your YouTube online set, right? So you have to have tools to go and bring it up. And one of the things the tool brought up was that I'm known to poke fun at Red Eye, this Australian. And the meme we have is he's alleged Australian, or the alleged continent, and he has to use ground harnesses to not fall off the earth. That sort of thing.
Yeah, spontaneous harness failure.
And someone said this could be deemed to be offensive to some Australians, and so if the person believes
Oh my God.
that I'm offending Australians, then it's a check mark, and that's your credit score, your YouTube score, drops, right? And it drops below a certain level. So it really, and it is not, are they offended, but do they think it could be offensive?
Does it have the potential to offend? Which everything on earth has the potential to offend somebody.
Yes.
Just nobody talk. That's.
I really hate you cannot. I'm sorry. I cannot take offense for somebody else.
Oh my God.
Right. I mean, if somebody else takes offense, that's fine, but I can't be offended on behalf of somebody else. And so to say, well, Red Eye might be offended by that. If he's not, that's the point. And
who cares if he's offended?
And that's my point. I wouldn't care either. No offense to Red Eye. I love Red Eye. He's a mod of my live chat. He's one of my favorite Australians. And
yes.
I feel bad for him hanging on for dear life so he doesn't get sucked into the sun. But I don't understand. Landon, what you're saying to me sounds surreal.
But again, they're not going to sit and spend 40 minutes watching a video, right? They're not going to spend a lot of time trying to determine whether or not your channel is worth getting tossed, right? So your appeal is basically saying to somebody or review, let's do a quick review and look at the facts at hand, and particularly the bot, whatever might have flagged it could be considered. But again, even if the flagging is fallacious, then the result is that you could get you get tossed. So I upset? No, because I'm not a content creator. Now, if it happened to your channel, I'd be upset because you guys do generally good things, at least when you have good people on.
Don't encourage Steve when I'm around. That's one of my rules.
but it spoke to me, and that was really sort of the notion that, do I want to be associated with YouTube? So I've been telling my content creators that are supporting, please be diversified. Don't just broadcast on YouTube, because if you get caught or hit, then your audience loses. If you at least have other platforms you're simultaneously casting to, you can at least survive, right?
The advertiser's not the same. I mean,
I understand.
You can survive on what? YouTube is obviously where the revenue comes from. Yes, sure, we all survive on Patreon as well, and I thank my patrons, explicitly for that. I have a couple in here, but I get that is transportable, but we also do make it off revenue. And when we switch to Twitch or BitChute or something like that, that's just not going to be the case. And as Shannon pointed out, the only game in town really is YouTube, and it's unfortunate. And by the way, if something does happen to your channel, you said the data is not deleted completely, which is good. But anybody have any suggestions of how you would back up your entire channel? That's just
by the way, once your account is suspended, you can't back it up.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, yeah. But before that happens, like for example, if someone wanted to actually back up in preparation a potential, a loss of their channel, how would they back up so much data?
There is on your Google account, the main account that's associated with YouTube, an ability to do a backup of every Google service, the data, right?
Google, Google, but that's like your communities. How do you back up your videos?
That's just rip your video and save them to a cloud. Put them in
that's a lot
OneDrive or put them on a hard drive.
Much data.
I mean,
I have copies of all of my videos on.
I have 1,000 videos.
Well, I don't know. Well, I can't solve your problem for you, Steve. That's the
you have the solution. The solution
Google
really
Studio is
put them on Facebook. Upload them on Facebook too.
You can bring it out. But Steve, I don't accept the notion that. I don't accept the notion that YouTube is the only game in town. I'm not telling people don't use YouTube. I'm telling myself that, but I am strongly suggesting don't be an YouTube exclusive only. And because for example, now as a banned user, I can't participate in chats. I can't thumb up anything. I can't do any of the things like the putting the money in and so forth, the tip jar type of thing through that process. I'm essentially, I'm essentially, the only thing I could do is anonymously look at videos through a browser if I want to do that.
Yeah,
so there's no redress
by YouTube.
What's that, Ozy?
You've been unpersoned by YouTube.
Well, on
nobody,
yes.
Landon.
Now, if I was a troll, I'd just create another sock account, right? But sure. I'm not a troll, and in fact, I'm not going to do that. And in some ways, we're firing each other mutually because
I'm so glad you mentioned that when you said I'm not a troll, right? I mean, the people who are hurt the most are actually people who are serious, who are not just trolls. The people who are immune to this stuff is people who don't create content and who just post, who do shit posting, as it's called, right? Mm-hmm. Who just harass and hector people and engage in hate speech all over the place. It's effortless for them to do it. There are people, I know people in this community who have hundreds of sock accounts and they brigade all by themselves. They can brigade a channel and just completely devastate it, or just hit it with one false flag after another, or copyright claim after another, and just boom, the channel blows up and it's gone for weeks. At best, it's gone for weeks, and then the channel can be reinstated. But sometimes that doesn't work, right? It is if the point of this is in part to get rid of the trolls, it's impossible, right? It's completely ineffective. Trolls are the people who are absolutely immune to all of this, and so the people who are most victimized are the people who are actually putting something on the line, who have skin in the game.
Yes.
Right? Whose minds could be changed, who could change other people's minds, who could elevate the discourse. And
hey!
So, yeah, exactly.
My catchphrase.
It's not where I got it.
And again, I want to be sure for people that are watching, please, if you like the content that these people are producing, please support them. Please go on to Patreon and support them, and through other means. Because I think it's important. If you like what you see, give them a buck, right? If nothing else, give them an ego boost saying someone cares, right? That's because otherwise, if you don't do that, you're going to get essentially the Hollywood paddling. You're going to get the least common denominator stuff. That being said, to the content creators I'm supporting, if you want my continued financial support, I need to see you as being a non-exclusive, that you're broadcasting in other areas besides just YouTube. I'm actually
talking to somebody right now. Somebody had mentioned about how to do a storage. I was trying to look into Periscope. I do have a Periscope account. I just haven't figured out how to use it yet. But I was looking into that option. I have Twitch, but I don't think that's too viable for me. That's more of a gaming platform.
Yeah, it's a gaming platform.
Yeah. So
are you talking just storage?
No. Well, I'm finding out there is actually a way to store things using a C-Box. A friend of mine's telling me about that. You could rent a long-term data storage facility kind of thing, kind of like it sounds like when you buy a 10 by 10 rental, right? It's just you're just buying something to store stuff on. for a nominal amount.
Well, Amazon Glacier service will do it too. Amazon's and the Glacier service, you can store huge amounts really cheap, and as long as you don't access it regularly.
And it'll actually pull the data. It'll actually pull the data out and store it for you. Rather, I mean, obviously, it isn't being feasible to download stuff in one at a time and then upload it. It would have to and the person I'm talking to says there's actually a one-shot deal. You can just kind of do it and it draws it out. So maybe there might be something like that. Then you would have to, but you still have to manually up those to the new site, right? To BitChute or to Periscope or whatever.
Now, I'm hearing from YouTube content creators that their ability to make money off advertising is pretty much reduced.
It's low.
It's a joke.
For me, I have not seen a single dime from non sequitur yet. I haven't made any money off that. Zero. I've lost money on it because I've had to like invest stuff in it. Yeah. But I live on literally what I make on Patreon and the revenue from this channel. That's it. That's my only source of income. Period. I don't get veterans. I don't have anything else but that.
No, so I know that there are other broadcast mediums that you can simulcast to, and there are even tools that allow you to do it simultaneously. Wouldn't you want to be reaching a broader audience and be resilient in case YouTube bounces you or suspends?
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. Which platform would be a good viable backup and that has the potential for ad revenue?
Well, I'm not talking about backup. I'm saying just in terms of reaching wider audience. Right.
Well,
different means.
There's MeWe and Minds.com and so forth.
I'm on MeWe, but that's more like a Facebook.
Yeah, Minds.com is almost like a cross between a YouTube and a Google Plus. You can post articles and little blogs and stuff like that, but you can share your videos and stuff like that. So, but it's not a platform specific for uploading videos, right? It's not like you create a channel. You create an account like a Google Plus account, right?
Vibrantly, thank you for the $2 super chat. He says, I wonder if YouTube's reading private YouTube DMs. I don't know, but I will tell you, remember when they came out and said, hey, look, we're going to be reviewing super chats now. And if your super chat doesn't meet a certain standard, the money goes somewhere else. That's disconcerting. Right? Yeah. Shannon's got to go. So thank you, Shannon. Always a pleasure. Hope you feel better.
Bye, Shannon.
Bye, guys.
You're going to die off and do it off camera after you leave.
Yeah, I'm going to go die now. See you later.
Do you get that's weird when your guests die?
Oh, she's sick. But that's weird that they can take your money from your DM. If they deem the DM is inappropriate, then whatever decision how they make that decision, then they could take away your funds.
I understand that they're not going to tell you exactly what happened. The reason why they won't tell you specifically is that they don't want to get an argument, nor do they want to even have the possibility of having a legal argument. If they merely said you violated community guidelines, then there's you can't sue them saying, well, that wasn't offensive, right? Well, right. When someone said, that the torque retarded the motion of the flywheel, and that word retarded is flagged and say you're being offensive against blah, and you get this snap judgment, then you could be bounced, right, for something making an innocent, an innocent mistake, or it's misunderstood, or it seems like, well, no, you should, use the proper pronoun or whatever that comes out to be offensive. You really do need to be in a position where I think, as a content creator, I'm asking people to look for other avenues and reach there. Now, there are content creators that I support that are actually well diversified, and they use a number of means to get reach their audiences besides just YouTube. Do they get ad revenue out of those things? No, but there are other channels out there, and I'm just encouraging people to do that. Again, I'm not asking you to stop YouTube. That was my choice on deleting my account, and also when not going to be charged. And please, folks, support these these content creators, because that's how you're going to get stuff you like.
Yeah, and the thing you're talking about, I think they call it dead naming, when you don't use a trans person's identified gender. And I get on Twitter and other sources, you can actually get banned for dead naming.
Well, dead naming isn't when you just don't use the desired pronoun. It's when you use the name
the
person was born with or had formally after they've changed their name to a person of the opposite sex.
Right, but it's still misgendering. It involves all.
Well, misgendering is one thing. Dead naming is a specific.
I thought dead naming would actually include pronouns as well.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay, so dead name is just using their birth name.
That's right. You're using a name that is dead. That name is dead.
That makes sense. Okay, fair enough.
And also, you can't use the excuse of saying, "Hey, these other people are doing bad or worse," right? There's so much data going into YouTube. They're only able to approximate to look at some of the things. And in some ways, they look at it based on a complaint basis. That's why flagging and YouTube heroes, alerting to a problem is something that carries weight. And so you can't simply say, well, this channel is worse, because when you're appealing your channel, your behavior, who you subscribe to, what you've said, what you've typed, what you've uploaded, and your public persona outside. Right. Those are all fair game in evaluation.
Yeah. If I call the cops on you, you can't say, well, look at that guy over there doing something so much worse. The cops are investigating you now, effectively.
Yeah.
There's Landon, you said something that I thought was really important here. Why don't they have these? You and Shannon both said something completely different that I agree with both of them. And Shannon was talking earlier. I had both of these in mind. That why don't they have these community guidelines properly spelled out? Why don't they specify exactly what hate speech is and so forth? It's because it's impossible. This is the slippery slope. Everyone has to sort of rely on, how do you define pornography? Well, I don't know how to define pornography, but I know it when I see it. And the people at YouTube, they know it when they see it. They know hate speech when they see it. They know, bullying when they see it. They don't have a definition. Right, we're at the mercy of whomever is reporting and whatever algorithms they're writing. They know darn well that if they get too specific, they can be held accountable, as you said.
Yes.
For inappropriately engaging in punitive measures against their content creators. Right, they could be held to task for that, and then they'll have to justify the specific definition. The way that you impose a politically correct notion on people, the way you chill everyone is to be as vague as you can get away with.
Exactly.
And so I think it is in part, they don't know how they're going to specify terms of service any more specifically than they have. They just don't know how. And they would never want to anyway, because it would just create a lot of pushback. And secondly, it wouldn't have the effect that they want. And the effect that they want is to just everyone self-censor. Everyone just watch what you say, tiptoe around, move around and speak as if, you have to walk on eggshells all the time. Sorry for mixing my metaphors there. The way it's working now achieves everything they want to achieve without encumbering them with any consequences that they don't want. Right? I don't think it's an accident. It's not negligence on their part. I think it is absolutely calculated. This is exactly what people want. It's the same thing with speech codes in universities. I see this as part of the same kind of thing. It's the same sort of a beast. Speech codes in universities, for instance, work the same way. It's very unclear what kind of things you can and can't say. And that's by design, because if you get too precise, as people's sensibilities change and people get more peevish about different things, you'll be allowed to say those things because they're not already in the speech code, right? And so they don't want to be specific. They want to be vague. They want to leave it to some star chamber or tribunal who's going to make these decisions, or better yet, leave it to an algorithm, and then there's no human being who's accountable, right? Yeah. Not even a programmer. And so I think these things work exactly as they want them to.
And also understand, in some jurisdictions there could be legal consequences for doing what they do, and so they can remain vague. They're not accountable. Now, how is YouTube accountable? Well, YouTube is accountable to with their revenue targets and with their profit targets to Google, which is accountable to Alphabet, and so it's the people at the Alphabet level are treating YouTube as a business, right? They don't go in and micromanage and say, no, you need to unflag this, you need to restore this account. They're looking at the bottom line, dollars and cents. And so people sit there and say, well, I got to protest and so forth. And no, they can take out a major multi million subscriber channel and not feel the effects, because if everyone says YouTube's the only game in town, well, they'll go and move from this person to that person, right? If it really, the only way that you're going to impact YouTube and the way it's run is if their business is not producing the profit margin that they're being asked to produce by the parent companies. It's a business. It's not a charity. YouTube is not a charity. It's a business, right?
Yeah. Well, and it all goes down to the advertisers, right? I mean, if the advertisers are pulling out, they're going to have knee-jerk reactions. We've seen it before. And it's the advertisers that tell YouTube what to do. The YouTube doesn't tell the advertisers.
Yeah. And I would not recommend people go to advertisers and recommend that they diversify their ad revenue, because that would impact YouTube's revenue and make Susan's job harder.
So what do you think about ad? I mean, do you think that a lot of these advertisers, I mean, they have a right to do it, am I wrong? But do you think they pull out of things with knee-jerk reactions just because some, like we've said before, people can get offended? And I've seen companies, they capitulate too much. They cave in because of pressure, even though I don't think they've done anything wrong. Like the commercials, certain commercials. I think it was Gillette.
Well, it's when they get blowback from bad publicity that impacts their brand. But advertisers, there are cable TV channels that have far racier, raunchier stuff than you could allow to get away with on YouTube, and people try to advertise on these hot shows because that's where the money is, right? So the advertisers want to do things. But remember, in YouTube land, you, the people watching, are not the customer. You're the product,
right?
And YouTube is selling you the product to the customer, who are advertisers. Content creators are not customers. Advertisers to YouTube are the customers. And so if you upset the customers by your behavior, it's much easier for them just to take you out.
Yeah, and there's an additional problem that I see that's sort of culturally here. The same advertiser, the same company that will pull its advertising from a YouTube channel because of some bad publicity will publicize, will support, some sporting event, for instance, that if people knew about it, it would offend the sensibilities. But they know that crowd doesn't care. That crowd's not right. So don't think that you're making companies more virtuous by doing this. That's just nonsense. I mean, how naive do you have to be, right? I mean, they will play both sides of the board against here. They will appear virtuous where a medium requires them to appear virtuous, and they will, they'll throw those same things. I mean, the Gillette thing was hilarious. Sure. I saw some ads that were really hilarious. We see this Gillette ad that was sort of quite politically correct and somewhat, I think, mildly disparaging of men in general, under the auspices of this idea of toxic masculinity. But meanwhile, they are sponsoring, excuse me, auto racing, and they have sort of these buxom, curvy models in skin-tight suits that look like they were painted on with the word Gillette written across their asses.
Sure.
I mean, you could not imagine a more objectifying piece of sexist advertising, right? You couldn't manufacture one that was legal and more objectifying than that. This is the same company, right? So you're not making these companies, you're not training these companies to be more virtuous. That I think is a fantasy. But I think what happens, though, is that companies learn to be more peevish. They learn to be more circumspect and more cagey. And what ends up happening is the very places where we would like companies the very places where we would want companies to be supportive are places where people are having important and difficult conversations, not NASCAR races, right? There's no important conversations going on in a NASCAR race, right? And it's not to disparage people who like NASCAR. I don't like NASCAR. I don't care about it. But for people who like it, it's a great form. It's a great sport and recreation. But the point is there aren't any important conversations there. It isn't. I don't think it's a very edifying thing, right? But a place like YouTube and places like Twitter and the like, these social media and Facebook and G Plus, these are places where people are having conversations, where they're having difficult discussions, and these are things that affect politics and have civilizational consequences. And what we're doing is we're training advertisers. Don't throw in your support of this. These places are too hot, and they want to get out of the kitchen. And what we should be doing is encouraging people to say, it doesn't matter how hot it is. I mean, my wish is that when a company gets told, I'm going to, stop buying your product, I wish they would say, yeah, well, chances are you're some kind of right-wing or left-wing dogmatic ideologue.
Yeah.
And you think that I will make the mistake that if you say this, there's 1,000 people behind you who feel the same way who will not buy my product. And that too is a fantasy. So, I mean, product boycotts and advertising and brand boycotts are two different kinds of things. People will say that they will not buy a product, right? And then go out and buy that product. And that, I think, is something that people should.
Well, there's also virtual signaling there. Oh, you shouldn't buy this kind of stuff. And they're the ones going out and buying the kind of stuff, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I see that too. Chris, go ahead.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to speak to Ozy for a second, just to say that, I have some disagreements with the things that he's been saying, but of course, I'm not going to have time to get into it.
Ozy's always wrong, so yeah, we all know.
So I just want to, I just wanted to address one of the things that Ozy had said to me in the previous video we were in together, because I had brought up that Lawrence Krauss holds a similar position to me when it comes to philosophy. And he had I had gone back and looked in the live chat and such. And it seems Ozy had left a message there saying that he had actually spoken to Krauss on his channel. And so I went over there, I looked at the video, and I saw what Krauss had said. Ozy claimed that Krauss said that philosophy is useful. And so I went to the channel and I looked for the video, found the clip, and I saw that Krauss, he only had a short statement on philosophy. They didn't go into details. He had said that something to the effect of philosophy is interesting and useful in its proper sphere. And that's at about 3:05, 3 minutes, 5 seconds into that particular video. And so I just wanted to say that before, and Ozy, I would like to talk to you at some other time if we could talk one-on-one, and and we could go into a lot of other stuff.
I mean, I think the thing I would be surprised if Lawrence Krauss actually said philosophy is useful. I think probably over the last I've heard him, and it was kind of a group musing, was philosophy can be amusing at times. I think it's probably and it's not meant to be pejorative. It's just that he's not a philosopher, and sometimes sometimes philosophy can be useful and sometimes it can be pedantic.
Well, he actually did say that it was interesting and useful, and thank you, Chris, for taking the time and the trouble to actually check on the video to see what was said. I have also heard Lawrence Krauss say in other venues, I think it was on Skeptic Fence show. I wasn't on that one, but I asked a question, and I don't know if it was in response to my question or someone else's question, but he said that he had taken some philosophy in university, and he had enjoyed it. And he didn't think it was a complete waste of time or anything like that. He just thinks that, look, philosophers don't have a lot to say about the kinds of questions that he's interested in, right? And to say that philosophy is interesting and useful in its proper domain or its proper sphere, that's true. That's true of everything. Everything is valuable and interesting in its proper sphere, and is usually a waste of time and kind of silly out of its proper sphere.
No.
So I don't think that's much of a
the discussion that was being had was about things such as saying, well, that philosophy set some of the foundations for the philosophy of science, and some of the things we do has an influence on it. So it isn't as if it's a useless thing. But on the other hand, it also can be amusing. And if you just want to find amusement, just ask who about the difference between an atheist and an agnostic.
Don't say.
Right? and we have a lot of fun, right? But
Who could you be talking about?
I have no idea.
Kevin,
but-
that's Kevin all the way. Hi, Kevin. Look at him. He knows it.
Yeah. So I think, and for the record, I think that I also took philosophy courses in college. I audited all my philosophy courses that I took because I didn't really want to spend the time doing the grade stuff. But I enjoyed the class and discussions and
Landon, you just ruined the entire hangout. Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it.
He's a king of killer.
So back and say in terms of, by the way, in terms of for YouTube and their economic model, and talking to people at Alpha about YouTube, one of the comments is that they've got a big problem, right? They have a severe problem in terms of too much content is flying towards them, and too many people have too many ways to become unhappy. And so what are you going to do? Right? They're trying to and they're trying to technology weigh themselves out of it. There's this kind of belief that maybe they can get self-censoring AI bots to figure out how this is done. And things such as being able to bleep things in midstream, right? As one of the goals that people are looking at. How can you have a bleep button when you say something that's not, not cool or not correct or not permitted? Because one of the feedback I said is, well, wouldn't it be better to teach people if you don't want to do something to say don't do that and give them some kind of feedback? And in my case, the problem is there's no feedback, right? If I'm not a content creator, there's nothing can do to me other than ban me. So it would be. So my comments was, yes, the problem of trying to do a pure technology solution is that you're going to race against people who are going to figure out how to get around the censors, right? To say things, particularly in other languages, and imply things that it's hard for a bot to really say that's offensive, right? The number of ways you can offend somebody is enormous.
Yeah, they tried that with Twitter, actually, where they would just automatically sort of, get rid of people for using certain words. But all that happens is people get cagey about that, and they just, you want to use the N-word, you want to say that horrible. I don't want to say it here because I don't want anybody to get trouble.
Yeah.
I hate using the expression N-word. It just seems so stupid and infantilizing. But I want people to hear the full offense of that word. It always bothers me. But when people use the expression N-word, but I mean, people will use indirect language, and that's what happens. They just sort of get around. They'll game the system that way. There's no way to police people's thinking this way, right?
Well,
people will try to police your thinking, but yeah.
My comment back was that I believe that the president of YouTube is not doing a good job in upholding the Google brand and the Alphabet brand, and that what she should be doing is instead allowing the content creators to target their audiences. So you could have a channel which is deemed not safe for work, or deemed offensive, or deemed racist, or deemed whatever, and market it to those people, right? That if you say your general audience and you're not general, then they could say, hey, we'll take out the general audience channel. But you should be able to have a channel which is, for example, not safe for people under age majority, or not safe for people who are easily offended, right? That we have that sort of things in our in our cable TV and satellite broadcast stuff.
Well, YouTube already does something like that. It does it rather clumsily. I mean, we've probably all done the thing where you're just sort of clicking on video after video after video. You're watching a video, and then it recommends videos. And I've done this, and the next thing you know, I find myself in this series of recommended videos that are absolutely bizarre. I'm all of a sudden I was looking at interviews, and I was just watching one interview after another, kind of documentary style interviews, and the next thing you know, I've got this long list of videos that are being recommended to me that are interviews with porn stars, and I was like, I didn't even know that YouTube allowed this. I didn't know that this was going on, and so I'm going through this, and it's really explicit content, and there was a warning like, when you click on it saying this is not, it wasn't not suitable for work, but I can't remember. It was like adult content, or I can't remember what it was.
Just a quick interrupt. Do you have a link to that just for research purposes?
No, I don't. But I mean, this has happened to me and it's happened to me more than once. I'm going to sound naive. Probably everyone knows this, but I only really sort of discovered it, some years ago, forgot about it. And then it happened to me again fairly recently, and I was like, wow, oh yeah, this thing again. So I mean, there's already something like that built into YouTube. I guess it's just for erotic content, or stuff that is vaguely pornish. But there's no reason why they can't just say, okay, look, we're going to divide YouTube into sort of, suitable for the family and not suitable for the family, right? Controversial and not controversial. Now, there's going to be controversy about what is actually controversial and what isn't, right? But it's their platform. They could do that if they wanted to, and I think that would actually avoid an awful lot of concerns that people have.
Sure.
Of sort of the wrong eyes seeing things. The difficulty I have is that YouTube seems bent on advancing a certain political view that I don't like, and people who are sympathetic to that political view are perfectly content with it. They just don't imagine that the political winds could change at any moment.
Let me ask you,
the white supremacists are sort of at the helm of YouTube, and now what's going to happen? Imagine coming out with anti-racist videos in that environment and finding yourself getting flagged all to hell, right? That's what I'm worried about.
Let me ask.
And I think, again, part of what I said is that YouTube could do a much better job of letting the content creator specify the type of audience that their content is appropriate for. Allow the same kind of targeting technology they have for advertisers, they should allow for content creators on there. The other thing I also mentioned is I said, be careful of antitrust. I said, you're not going to get it in the current administration, but you want political changes, YouTube antitrust would be something that would be very interesting. And you may not get it started in the US, but you could certainly do it in other, let's say, European avenues. And I cautioned them saying, you should not try to go and crush your competition. You should be competing for audience rather than trying to kill the other audience. So again, I'm going to tell content creators, diversify and figure out how to do that, because that's, if you want my support, be a diverse content creator in terms of your platforms.
Well, let me ask this question. Do you really even think that Google perceives any sort of problem? I mean, I listened to what you said, Landon, with regards to your account and being essentially totally banned, but you're not? Can anybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
well,
I wanted to bring up the question of if Google even perceives a problem, because you guys actually mentioned earlier on that they keep their rules very unclear, and I think that's done by design. They don't want to be targeted for any sort of lawsuits. So if they make things very specific, then it's very, very easy for them to get targeted for lawsuits. Otherwise, if they keep it very, very rough and people don't really have an understanding of what's allowed and what isn't allowed, then they're in the clear. So what do you think about that?
Real quick, Landon, you're gonna have to refresh. What happens every so often, this is an old bug on Google Hangouts, that for some reason one person cannot hear a specific person. It's been around for a very long time.
Sorry, Landon.
Exit and come back in, Landon, and they'll fix that usually.
So now, what if you deliberately don't want to listen to somebody? Can you just so if I want to turn?
Here's the thing: you can block somebody. There's a feature you can block somebody, but here's the thing: we have a kind of a rule: if you block somebody, you get ejected 90% of the time. The reason being is you cannot have an effective dialogue when one person is such a special snowflake and gets a wild hair that says, "I don't like what Ozy's saying. I'm going to block him." Now you have no idea what's going on. And by the way, I was going to add that before we go back to Kevin's question quick. It actually, all these things prevent people with hypersensitivities and special snowflakes from joining Hangouts, because nobody wants them around because of the problems they cause. It's counterproductive to their narrative, I assure you. But Kevin, back to your question.
Can you hear me now, Landon?
Yes, I can.
Okay. No, I was asking you the question of, does Google even perceive a problem, do you think? I mean, is it really an issue to them? I mean, individuals like yourself get bumped off, and whether it be an accident or deliberate, I just don't get, I mean, there's really no PR for Google that I ever see. They don't really even talk to the public on a regular basis about YouTube or problems, do they?
There are people they're concerned about as their shareholders.
Yeah.
And so to the extent that YouTube supports shareholder profits, they like it. To the extent that YouTube doesn't meet shareholder goals, they don't like it, right? And that's the evaluation, right? And the people at the top of Alphabet own a lot of the shares, so they're also very self-interested. But the other thing that they tend to not do, I know from experience, is they do not micromanage, do not meddle.
Yeah.
So you cannot go to them and say, hey, hire me, right? Because they say, no, get yourself hired in one of our businesses and make yourself useful. We don't meddle in those details. So they're going to look at the bottom line, and they're not going to object because I said, hey, I've been banned. Now, at a nice cocktail party, I'll say, hey, and I won't name one of the twins, I've been banned, and we'll have a nice laugh at it. But I will not ask them to reinstate it. Because that's meddling in their affairs, their internal affairs of their profits and their goals, their margins, the revenue, all those sorts of things are very detailed business type secrets you won't see out in the public.
Sure. And I mean, they really don't have any competition in this space either. I mean, you guys mentioned earlier on that you've got a few other video sites, but they're nothing compared to YouTube's. And I think they're very well aware that they essentially have a legitimate monopoly. So unless you have a whole bunch of people leaving, like in the case of Facebook, where a lot of people are dumping that, then I don't think they really do give a shit, in my opinion. So.
And there was a case where, again, I said, be careful of the monopoly system that's in place. Right? That's going to be something that you're going to have. You want to avoid that. You avoid the appearance of being a monopoly when you're in eras where monopolies get attacked. Now we're not in that kind of era right now, but later on it could be.
We aren't.
We're not attacking monopolies.
I think the current climate within the United States, I should say, is not to go after monopolies, but certainly in places like Europe, it is.
Well, there's at least one presidential candidate right now, Elizabeth Warren, who's making noises, sort of crafting policy around the idea of breaking up things like Google, YouTube, Twitter, all the, Facebook, things like that. I don't know if I've named all the right ones, but
sure.
At least a couple of those, if not all of them. She's made noises about quite publicly now about breaking this up. So antitrust is something that these companies really do need to worry about.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to be mean. I was saying you should be careful about that, and you should welcome YouTube competitors, and you should make it easy for people to be, simulcasting, right? And you should compete on YouTube being better than the other people, as opposed to YouTube being the only game in town. That's the message I said. So have YouTube use the targeting technology that they do for advertisers for content creators, and make it easy for people to be multi-platform.
Yeah, YouTube is sort of owes its success not to the fact that it's better than Ustream and whatever the VidStream, or I don't know what the other platform, Vimeo and stuff like that.
Yeah,
right. I mean, there are others out there, and the reason they aren't even a close, none of them are even a close second, is not because YouTube is so much better. It's just that YouTube was first, and as a result, it got this huge audience effectively locked in. This is a case of nothing succeeds like success, right? Success brings its own advantage that can become an unfair competitive advantage, just by dint of having been first.
Yeah, and again, and I say, if you're watching YouTube, you're the product, but recognize that if you like content creators, find ways to support them, right? And that's, and I can't stress that enough, because if you don't support your content creators you like, you're going to be given the content creators you deserve.
Yeah, and we got to be ending this soon. So, Chris, do you want anything real quick? What was that? I didn't read that. Show that again.
Well,
And we can have
Well,
another hangout coming up this week if you want to have a long conversation with Ozy.
Yeah, I would like
By
to
all
give them
means,
a
sure.
chance. I just wanted to say, thanks for giving me the chance to even appear with you again, because after the first time I was being aggressive and I was trying to strike a balance that wouldn't make you too angry with me, and so you still have been giving me a chance. You haven't blocked me or anything. And so that's great.
No,
I think that we can still work.
yeah, there's a real quick, there's this weird narrative. I don't block people for disagreeing. It has never happened. Ozzy's known me a very long time. I don't think he's ever seen me block anybody merely for disagreeing. I block for other reasons, but disagreement, no, I thrive on that.
Steve, I want you to know I'm terrified of disagreeing with you.
I know. I've
I know
blocked
you'll
him like
block me, so
10,000
I
times.
never
Get the hell out. Ozzy lives in fear of me. So does Landon. Matter of fact, Landon when Landon corrected me on something, and I didn't double down on it. I didn't go, oh, this guy, Landon, he thinks he knows math. I was like, yeah, right. It's like, what am I supposed to do? It's math.
Anyway, I just want to say, again, thanks for giving me the chance. And if I can come on again, I'd appreciate it to have a
you're welcome anytime.
Discussion about the discussion that we were having before. And I just want to make sure that I plug myself this time, because I have a YouTube channel. You can find me at Christopher Mann, K-R-I-S, spelled Chris with a K. And you can find me on Facebook, Christopher Mann, same thing. And on Twitter at HIIROPPOI. That's it.
And what sort of stuff do you do? But sorry,
I'm interested in, I have a system of that I call logical debate, where I came up with a system of rules that are I believe, internally consistent, and it's a system that allows you to more easily change people's minds using statements that are only statements that are true and logical. And so I want to get into the details of how that works.
So logical positivism, then.
I know what that is. I will not say, yeah.
Okay, because it sounds like logical positivism to me.
It's not exactly the same. That's what I just want to say that.
I'm going to be ending this. And by the way, people will know that I told Shannon the other day that I'm going to be going 30 days without insulting somebody. So if you catch me, let me know. I'm being hyper aware of it, that I'm not insulting anyone. But I want to go on record here for like people on Twitter. Twitter is not my platform, right? I really don't think I'm ever grow my Twitter. I really don't care that much. I use it to test arguments. And if I piss people off, honestly, I say this bluntly, I don't care. I don't care for my Twitter. It's just for fun. If people don't like it, they can block. It's Twitter's not my platform.
Or you can
how I am in real life. Well, how I am in real life is how I'm on YouTube, right? This is the real me. Okay. Twitter, it's just words on a page, right? They don't see the actual person typing it. I never get angry. I never get upset with people. I never start yelling or banging my keyboard. It comes across that way because this is how I write it, right? But that's not how I actually am in real life. And I'm really trying to see if people can see the distinction. I want to see if they move past that. I know a lot of people don't agree with that style. I get a lot of people saying that they don't like that particular way I approach things. I get that. I listen to that. But it's Twitter. I only have 2,000 followers. Most of the people on there, half of them that really agree with me and learn things, those are great. The other half are not people I really want to have contact with anyways. So I use them to explain to the other people, this is the stuff that I'm arguing against. This is the dogmatism that I'm arguing against. This is the type of atheist that's not willing to listen to these types of hangouts. These are the atheists are not listening to the people that are expertise in the areas like Ozy, who makes brilliant arguments that have been edifying and educational.
Ozy's a sham. What are you talking about? Come on.
you and Ozy go back a long way too.
That's enough about me right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Kevin has some pretty good.
Get me in trouble.
Kevin's come a long way too. I've known Kevin for decades.
I'm a sham too. Come on, man. Let's be real.
But you've gotten a lot more interest in philosophy over these discussions as well.
Don't lie to people. It's okay.
I know. I'm being nice. I can't insult you like I normally do.
You can't insult. You almost had him. You almost had him.
I'm
You almost got him.
for this. Let me have my thing. You guys don't even know how much kind of crap I usually talk about Kevin. But anyways,
boy.
No. People, what's funny is I always think that people know each other, and yet because we kind of a small community, but at the same time it's pretty big. I know a lot of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, anybody last thoughts on this? Anything they want to add? And by the way, that was great on Hume's induction, Ozy. I think that I don't know how else you will explain it to somebody. I think that the main takeaway I just want from that is don't think Hume's induction is just the fact that induction doesn't lead to deductive arguments, right? That's not Hume's induction. And I think I see that most people argue it that way. They think that that's what it means, and it doesn't. Yeah.
And I would just say I'm not been out of shape that I'm not on YouTube. I didn't really use it as a content distribution platform, and I've got other things to do in life than to worry about YouTube stuff. So fine, you know, I'm gone. It is sad that I can't mix it up in the chat, because I enjoyed the conversation back and forth in the chat room. So I'm sorry that I won't be able to. I'll be a lurker. I can't thumbs up or thumbs down something. But on the other hand, it also means when I go and watch a dumpster fire video, I'm not going to get a bunch of suggestions that you know also watch other dumpster fires. Right? That was the one thing I noticed. It was odd. Was as soon as I started watching some of your better dumpster fires, it started giving me more dumpster fires to look at. So anyway, so goodbye YouTube, and you know, for those that that know how to get a hold of me, I'm you know, on other channels. And for those that don't know how to get a hold of me, talk to somebody who does.
There you go.
I'd be
guys.
happy to be on people's channels and have conversations.
Oh, are you going to be on Pim's channel Tuesday? I got invited for Morning Wood to wake up with Morning Wood.
It's either. I think he's running me on Thursday, but I'm not quite sure. Maybe it was I think it was the sort of the so-called United Kingdom's Brexit day, but they've changed that now. So.
All right.
Those are fires.
So the only thing I'm going to ask is, have you had any luck with Susskind? By the way, I was going to remind you, I hadn't talked to you for a while. Have you looked into that at all? We had Kraus on. You can tell him we had Kraus on, and I'm going to get Dr. Jeff Zinkowski. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. He's an RTB scholar, astrophysicist, and he wrote a book called "Why Should You Be Afraid of the Multiverse" or something like that. Who's Afraid of Multiverse? And he quotes Susskind, and I guess he knows Susskind, and so he's coming on. So maybe Susskind.
So I have an upcoming opportunity to
okay,
mention.
cool. I'll get you the information though, because that would be an amazing thing. Because I halfway through the cosmic landscape, I haven't finished it yet. But anyways, guys, good night. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you later.